A wealthy man's hands tremble as he holds a tiny pink bundle by the dark lake. His face twists with anger. A girl useless. Without hesitation, he tosses his newborn daughter into the icy waters and walks away. What he doesn't see the couple watching. From the shadows already rushing to save her. Before watching full stories, comment below from where you're watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The night was cold with rain pouring from the dark sky as Richard Miller drove his luxury car along the empty road beside Silver Lake. His face showed no emotion, only determination, as his expensive leather gloves gripped the steering wheel tightly. In the back seat, wrapped in a pink blanket, lay his newborn daughter, just 3 days old. A girl, he muttered bitterly. All this waiting for a girl. Richard had built an empire worth millions. Miller Enterprises stood tall among the city's skyline, a testament to his ruthless business tactics. For years, he had dreamed of a son to inherit his kingdom to carry on the Miller name. When his wife Sarah gave birth to a daughter instead, something broke inside him. The doctor said, "We can try again in a year." Sarah had whispered from her hospital bed, seeing the disappointment in his eyes. But Richard couldn't wait. In his twisted mind, this child was a mistake that needed correction. Sarah was still recovering in the hospital, unaware of what he planned to do tonight. Stopping at the lakeside, Richard stepped out into the rain. He opened the back door and lifted the small bundle. For a moment, the baby opened her eyes, deep blue eyes that seemed to look straight into his soul. She didn't cry, just gazed at him curiously. Richard hesitated briefly, then hardened his heart. With a swift motion, he tossed the bundle into the deep waters of Silver Lake and watched as the tiny package sank beneath the ripples. Without looking back, he returned to his car and drove away, the windshield wipers erasing all evidence of what had happened. "It's done," he told himself. "Now we can try again for a proper heir." What Richard didn't see was the young couple, Mary and David Walker, who had been taking shelter from the rain under a nearby bridge. They had witnessed everything. "Oh my God," Mary gasped, already running toward the lake. David was faster, diving into the cold water without hesitation. The seconds felt like hours as Mary waited at the edge, praying desperately. Finally, David's head broke the surface, one arm keeping him afloat while the other held the pink bundle. "She's alive," he shouted, swimming back to shore. Mary quickly took the baby, removing the soaked blanket and wrapping her in her own coat. The little girl coughed up water, but then took a breath, her tiny chest rising and falling. "We need to call the police," David said, reaching for his phone. Mary looked down at the innocent face of the baby, then at the disappearing taillights of the expensive car. "And tell them what? That we saw a man throw his baby in the lake. They'll never believe us against someone rich enough to drive a car like that." David's face fell, knowing she was right. In their small town, money talked. "Then what do we do?" he asked. Mary's arms tightened around the baby. "We've been trying for 5 years to have a child. Maybe this is God's answer to our prayers. But Mary, this is a child who would have died tonight if we hadn't been here." Mary interrupted. Someone wanted her dead. "David, if we report this, who knows what might happen to her?" David looked into his wife's determined eyes, then at the tiny miracle in her arms. Slowly he nodded. "We'll need to leave town," he said softly. "Start somewhere new." Mary smiled through her tears. "We'll call her Hope because that's what she is." 27 years passed. Richard Miller's empire had grown even larger. He had eventually gotten his son, though it had cost him his first wife. Sarah had never recovered from the sudden infant death syndrome that Richard claimed had taken their daughter. The grief drove them apart, and within 2 years, he had remarried a younger woman who gave him Robert, his pride and joy. Now in his 60s, Richard sat in his office overlooking the city. Life had given him everything he wanted. His son was being groomed to take over the business. His wealth had doubled again. He had all but forgotten that rainy night at Silver Lake. But across town in the chambers of the newly appointed Judge Hope Walker, that night was about to come back to haunt him. Hope adjusted her black robes and studied the case file before her. She had worked tirelessly to reach this position, driven by a sense of justice that her adoptive parents had instilled in her. Mary and David had told her the truth when she turned 18, how they had found her, saved her, and raised her as their own. The revelation had shocked her to her core, but instead of breaking her, it had given her purpose. Hope had channeled her, pain into determination, graduating at the top of her law school class and rising quickly through the ranks of the justice system. Now fate had placed Richard Miller's case in her hands. The businessman was being sued by former employees for fraud and unsafe working conditions. It was a high-profile case that no one expected the plaintiffs to win. Hope's assistant knocked on her door. "Judge Walker, the Miller case is ready to begin." Hope nodded, her heart pounding. For years she had searched for information about her biological parents. A private investigator had eventually uncovered the truth, including medical records that matched her rare blood type to Sarah and Richard Miller, and security footage from the hospital showing Richard leaving with a baby the night before reporting his daughter's death. She had all the evidence but had never pursued charges. Instead, she had waited for the perfect moment, a moment when justice could be truly served. Richard Miller walked confidently into the courtroom, his expensive suit and commanding presence, drawing all eyes to him. He barely glanced at the judge's bench, already discussing strategy with his lawyers. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Hope Walker," the bailiff announced. Richard stood with everyone else, finally looking up as the young judge entered. Something about her made him pause, a familiar feature he couldn't quite place. Hope took her seat and looked directly at Richard Miller for the first time. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and for a moment Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "Mr. Miller," Hope said, her voice calm and professional, "I believe you'll find this court doesn't favor wealth over justice." The trial proceeded with Hope being meticulously fair. She allowed both sides to present their cases fully, ruling on objections with careful consideration. But as the days passed, Richard grew increasingly uncomfortable under her steady gaze. On the 5th day, Hope called a brief recess and asked both attorneys to approach the bench. "There's a matter I must disclose," she said. "I've considered recusing myself from this case, but after careful consideration of legal precedent, I've determined it's unnecessary." Richard's lawyer looked confused. "Your Honor, what matter are you referring to?" Hope looked directly at Richard as she spoke. 27 years ago, Mr. Miller reported the death of his infant daughter. I have reason to believe that report was false. Richard's face pad. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" "No joke, Mr. Miller," Hope replied calmly. "I filed the evidence with the district attorney's office this morning. They'll be investigating charges of attempted murder, child abandonment, and falsifying death records." The courtroom fell silent as Richard stared at Hope, truly seeing her for the first time. The blue eyes, his wife Sarah's eyes, stared back at him without flinching. "You," he whispered. "Yes," Hope replied. "The daughter you threw into Silver Lake. The one you left to die because she wasn't the son you wanted." Richard's lawyer grabbed his arm. "Don't say another word. We need to talk in private." But Richard couldn't move. Couldn't look away from those accusing blue eyes. "How did you survive?" Hope's expression remained neutral. "A miracle. A couple who witnessed what you did. They saved me, raised me, and taught me that justice always finds a way." The next few weeks became a media sensation. Richard Miller, the powerful millionaire charged with the attempted murder of his own infant daughter, now the very judge, presiding over his fraud case. He was forced to step down from his company as shareholders fled. His son Robert, horrified by the revelations, publicly denounced him. Sarah, Richard's first wife, came forward after seeing Hope on the news. The resemblance to herself was undeniable. DNA tests confirmed what Hope already knew. Sarah was her biological mother. "I never believed she died of natural causes," Sarah told reporters, tears streaming down her face. "I just never had proof." The reunion between mother and daughter was private but healing. Sarah had never had other children, the grief too overwhelming. Now she had a second chance with the daughter she thought she'd lost. As for Richard, he faced not only prison time but the complete destruction of everything he had built. The fraud case revealed a pattern of corruption that stretched back decades. His empire crumbled around him as former business partners distanced themselves. Hope recused herself from the fraud case after the revelation, but the damage was done. With the evidence now public, another judge found Richard guilty on all counts. On the day of Richard's sentencing for the attempted murder charge, Hope sat in the courtroom as an observer. She watched as the man who had so callously thrown her away faced the consequences of his actions. Richard, now looking much older than his years, turned to look at her before being led away. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I don't expect forgiveness." Hope stood up, her posture straight and dignified. "This isn't about forgiveness, Mr. Miller. It's about justice, something every child deserves, regardless of their gender." As Richard was led away to begin his 15-year sentence, Hope walked out of the courtroom into the bright sunshine. Sarah was waiting for her on the steps. "Ready to go home?" Sarah asked, linking her arm through her daughter's. Hope nodded, feeling a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Yes, finally ready." They walked down the courthouse steps together, leaving behind the shadows of the past and stepping into a future bright with possibility. Hope had come full circle from a newborn discarded in the lake to a judge upholding justice for all. Her journey was proof that sometimes the greatest revenge is not just surviving, but thriving despite those who tried to destroy you. And somewhere, Mary and David Walker watched over their adopted daughter with pride, knowing that the baby they had saved that rainy night had grown into a woman who would save others through her commitment to justice and truth.